All right. All right, we're going to call to order the Jail District Board of Directors work session meeting. Today is Tuesday, May 20th. We're meeting in the Board of Supervisors hearing room in Bisbee. Pursuant to ARS 38431.02, the public will have access to the meeting room 15 minutes prior to the start of the meeting. Any item on this agenda is open for discussion. The Board of Supervisors will attend in person. Members of the public may also attend this meeting via Microsoft Teams or the mobile app. Work sessions are a time for county staff and our consultants to inform and discuss agenda items with the Board of Supervisors, and public comment will not be taken. We'll do a roll call. District 1. District 2.
Gomez is here.
District 3, Antonori is here. All three supervisors are present and in person. We'll begin with introduction. Sharon, you want to lead us off? We kind of know most of these guys. Was this one here last time? Is this a new guy?
This is a new thing.
Yeah.
That's here in the last one, but I'll introduce myself again.
Okay. Start with Karen. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Karen Chin with Chin Planning.
All right.
Larry Smith with the DLR Group.
Gary Rattel, DLR Group.
Jacob Reeves, DLR Group.
Phil Bordon, Cochise County.
All right. So we know Sheriff. All right. So I guess, should I just throw it over to Karen, or you want to say something first?
No, I'll just say that this is the last work session the board will have with Chin and DLR. This is their final draft of their report. They'll be wrapping up their study here, so ask them all the questions you can today. Going. Wow. That doesn't quite fair, but it's well. Is this the microphone? Because I have a problem.
No, that's the mic.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yeah. She needs the clicker.
Is that it?
So this.
Apparently I wasn't talking loud enough.
Oh,
Everybody hear me?
Okay.
Okay, you can hear me? Okay.
Oh, we got you.
All right. Well, when I was here last time, I presented a lot of data in a very condensed version, so I tried to even condense that down and then get in some information we hadn't seen before, which is the detail of the plan for a new jail facility, square footage, the concepts of that, which are in the full draft report, but I'm going to summarize that today and then get into the conversation. And then, of course, DLR will present an assessment of the sites and the cost estimate for the program that I developed. Okay, so on the first page of this, we just have, let's see which way are we going here. Sure, I know. Yeah. This is just a summary about the population. Cochise County is about 125,000 population now, and it's projected to grow to about 130 citizens by the end of 2040. And the Sierra Vista and unincorporated areas will comprise the two largest parts of the population. In fact, Sierra Vista will be 36% of the population. It's projected to be 36% of the population by 2040. Crime and arrest, we see everyone uses the concept that a jail is related to crime and arrest, and that's not always true because actually reported crime and arrests are down in the county about 5% per year for reported crimes and about 5% per year for arrests. And arrest for what's called Group B offenses and crimes against society, which are lower level, nonviolent kind of offenses. So it's not, crimes against a person, like bad check writing, curfew, loitering, liquor law violations, gambling, trespassing. That's like 74% of the arrests that were made in 2022 in the county.
So one of the things, I hate to interrupt, but Mr. Crosby brought up in a previous meeting where we were referring to your report that your data ends in 2023 and that you didn't have any of the 2024 data.
Yeah. Well, I have 2024 information for the jail, but reported crime and arrest data is reported to you use here the TIBER system, incident-based reporting system. It usually lags by at least 2 years. So
really?
That information, if you go to the internet, I actually have through 2023, but reported crime is from 2017 to 2023. But when I was doing the study and collecting the data last year, it needs to be collected annually. So by the end of this year, you'll be able to get 24 data.
I got you, but you didn't have access to the county attorney and the sheriff's department for the 24 data?
The reported crime is reported through the Arizona Department of Criminal.
Oh, I would think the county attorney.
We're trying to get it from the raw source, either the attorney or probation.
Well, but everybody that's arrested or read a reported crime doesn't necessarily end up in the jail. It doesn't necessarily end up in the county attorney's office.
Yeah, but we know that, though.
Police departments report, and by the way, it's voluntary
Oh,
report.
he's talking about all the other municipalities that she doesn't have access to.
They report crime and arrests. I mean, there could be crime and arrest that's not collected all by the county attorney because not every case is going to come, and not every crime is going to end up in arrest. Reported crime is just reported crime, and that's the serious crimes. and that's reported by arresting jurisdictions in the county, of which here in Cochise County, you've got the police department, you've got the sheriff's, there's a whole lot of people that can
Okay, I
report
get,
crime
I
and
get,
they
I
can
get
make
your,
arrests.
I get your point. But
Nashville,
the jail utilization side of it and the court impact side of it, we could get
yeah,
that
well, I had
information.
that through the end of 2024 in the jail data.
Oh,
because there's
okay,
good jail data that's collected, but I was collecting that last fall, and since, the last 6 months or 5 months, the data has not been updated. I would have to update it every month. But if you're asking about crime and arrest data, that typically, in every jurisdiction I work in, could be a lag of at least 2 years.
And I have to ask a question
Yeah.
because this is, when I read this whole thing, it just seems to me, and now this is
Yeah.
the problem of being a new member, right?
That's-
But it's very geared to Sierra Vista being the main population growth. And so when you do your jail selections, all kind of geared to that. And I'm just wondering, what studies, so that I can go and look and do my own research,
Yeah.
did you decide that Douglas would only grow or only be 13% of the population of the county? Is that what that number stands for?
And this,
Or is that growth?
no, that's the percent of the population by 2040. And this is the U.S. Census Bureau in your state in Arizona that does forecasting. I do not forecast.
Okay, so they don't take in consideration the Port of Authority or any kind of growth in economic development, right?
That was a question that came up early on in the technical advisory committee. And so I contacted Yuma County and talked to their economic development director and said, what was there? Did they anticipate population growth? Because there is a study that's been produced. I refer to it in the report here for this county that says by expanding the Douglas Port, they're assuming it's going to be probably 250 additional jobs. And that was from the economic development.
And it's funny because when I would switch to meeting, there was a whole different kind of conversation about how there's 10,000 jobs, we're going to come, blah, 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 blah. So I guess, it seems to me that it's very geared toward Sierra Vista being the main population, and a lot of people have some disagreement about that. So anyway.
Well, and Sharon was one that really brought up at our first meeting saying, what about, we know we're going to get the expansion of the port of entry in Douglas and, what's the impact on the population? So I was referred to a study that you provided to me that had been done here locally, and it was what they assumed would be an addition of 200 or 250 additional jobs. And I refer to that in the section of the report where I talk about that.
And
But it's kind of an unknown. And so I did try to reach out to another county to say, how did that affect their population when they expanded their port of entry?
Well, Nogales grew huge.
Well, and when I talked to the director of economic development, basically what he said is they didn't know exactly how their population was growing. And just because they added additional jobs didn't necessarily refer to criminal justice activity. I mean, what I was looking at, I was telling them I'm very focused on looking at the jail population, and they didn't do any analysis of that. So I tried to follow up on that. But by the way, I don't do demographic projections of the population. People fight over what the census numbers are when you take every 10 years. So when I get a project, I go to what is the accepted forecasting for general population and then broken down by county or by cities within that population. And so this information, I didn't create this.
It's from the
Arizona, let me set a source on here, where I got the actual.
The Census Bureau
Yeah,
and
the
the
Census-
Arizona Office
Office
of
of Employment.
Employment. Yeah.
That's where this came from.
because then the ACA has a totally different bend on it. So okay, all right. So I just wanted to make sure I understood where this is driven by. Okay.
Now the next thing is to look at the Superior Court filings and criminal court case filing by charge. And again, this is a greatly condensed version of 48 pages data assessment, but I'm just trying to pick the highlights up. And what you can see here, and this is for the year of 2024, the most recent year that obviously have data for on the fiscal year, 48% of the actual criminal court filings in the Superior Court were for something combined of drug possession, paraphernalia, or sales, or public order, DUI, DWI, and motor vehicle other charges. So, a pattern again of everybody that's been arrested and then going through the Superior Court system. There are many people that it's not just like a crime against a person or a serious crime, which will lend itself later to talking about are there other alternatives to jail capacity in the future to do other kinds of programs that other jurisdictions are accepting. And also, I pick a note here, the manner of sentencing in the Superior Court. Most people that go to the Superior Court are placed on probation. And I focus on probation a lot when I'm doing these studies because it's supposed to be the arm of the criminal justice system that supervises people in the community. They've been deemed they don't need to be in the jail. But if they violate, they're going back into the jail. And if you have a violation of probation, you have a hearing set for 30 days out, so it really impacts on length of stay at the jail. And we know, and you'll see in a minute, what's driving the jail population here is not so much, the jail is only a function of how many people you put in, how long you keep them. Monthly admissions are actually down here. What is really increasing is the length of stay, and I'll show you that in the next slide. And that's why I always take a look at anything that's going to impact on length of stay. Cause delay, because within the jail, any delays that are happening, that's going to add up to days and people in jail in the population, what's needed, what you have now and what's needed in the future. So the next slide just summarizes in one slide. You could see the graph. Average daily population was pretty consistent between 250 to 200 or 300 inmates, but it did seriously blip up in 2022 and 2023, where the average daily population was 315 on average for that year. And then by the year of 2023, the average for that year creeped up to 335 population, and it dipped down a little bit through the end of, I had data through October of last year when I collected data. Again, the note says that admissions are actually down overall from 2014. You're averaging about 450 admissions per year, and that's actually down. I didn't include that graph here, but it's in the full report. The graph that I did want to show and what's driving the daily population is the length of stay, going from an average of 16 days, and by the end of last year, it was averaging over 20 days. And that's the overall average. But in doing a deeper snapshot, which I had great assistance from the jail to dig deeper on to say some other factors besides the data they normally collect, and based on a one-day snapshot, well, they do collect information about male and female, but 85% of the population is male, 69% Caucasian. Pretrial status, 82%, which you expect because a jail is the holding before someone might be sentenced to prison. 18 to 24-year-olds was a majority. The 40-year-olds, that was 62%. 54% had a bond set. That meant that 46% had no bond set, so they were going to be in the jail, and that's something else I'll bring up. Somebody asked on this table, I can't remember which of you supervisors asked, but I did have information about 65% are residents of Cochise County, and also 79.5% are U.S. citizens. So I don't know if you asked that, Mr. Anderson.
I may have asked.
Somebody else, yeah. And you'll see that its information is in there. Now, even though I said the overall average length of stay is 20 days, on the snapshot day that I took, 28% of the population in the jail had been in that jail for over 100 days. So it's not that everybody's going in and out fast. You've got a number of inmates that are there for a considerable amount of time. And also, certainly want to go back to filings in the court, a very high percentage of the population, very exponentially larger than you have in the general population, have serious mental health and substance abuse issues.
20%.
Yeah.
And so it went up 86% in 2 years, right?
Yes.
This whole, and are these people who are dealing like a result from drug use or just have mental health, like, psychotic or?
It's a combination. Yeah. It's not unique to this county. It's every jail that I'm working in. That's what is a huge, it's different.
And so later on, do you talk about the cost of having them in the jail versus, say, a psych ward or more of an institutional hospital setting? Well,
that's going to be when I talk about just in general.
Okay.
If you talk about the future and the size of a jail and the cost of a jail, there are definitely things that in my opinion, from this assessment, that Cochise County could be doing it's not that the other options are free. They tend to be more effective, more appropriate, and longer term can help reduce the cycle of recidivism. There will still be people that will end up in the jail with serious mental illness and substance abuse problems. But to expand and to be screening at the very intake, so I do want to talk about in the jail that screening and assessment would go right in intake, and if people can be placed on monitors and to assure their appearance in court, everyone doesn't need to stay in the jail.
And they could be maybe assessed in the
and
county
community services or others.
Mr. Crosby?
Christian, do you have any idea why there is a somewhat of a spike for 2023 church?
I don't have an idea for that because what I saw, although this is what I've seen around the country, during COVID, things really spiked down. I mean, I was doing a jail project in Cuyahoga County, Cleveland. They had 2,600 inmates in the jail, and they got down to 950 as they had to, for obvious reasons. You can't wear masks, you can't be washing your hands, things like that in jail. So they got people out. And I have seen, as a result, when COVID ended, an uptick or going back closer to what the population is. But this is a pretty substantial increase in average daily population, but it's come back down. And I don't really have a reason for it. And I guess I'll turn around and say, anybody in the audience here have a reason that population spiked up? I don't really have a reason for that.
You're nodding your head, man. Come on up to the microphone if you care to. And introduce yourself for us, please.
Lieutenant Heisner. A lot of it had to do with COVID. As soon as they found out that the jail was open to anybody coming in, they were bringing in the misdemeanors, they were bringing in the warrants, they were bringing in probation. They filled it up as much as they could, as quickly as they could.
And I saw that in the country, that it's basically an uptick after COVID when things
Okay.
went way down, when the gates could open up again. I'm seeing that spike. And now it's kind of calmed down, as you see, for this year. But in those years of COVID, when really very strict admissions to the jail because of the issue of COVID.
Right.
So you're kind of doing a catch up, maybe.
That's exactly what they were doing.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
Well, so then just to summarize, and I saw this last time, it's a lot of words on the page, but,
Yeah.
you know, first of all, there's, as you recall, I was asked to and did develop a program, you know it per site, but in the future, if you wanted to develop a courthouse or a sheriff's office in this new site, whether it be future years or whatever, that there certainly is a reason to have co-location because the criminal justice as it relates to the sheriff, the court, and the jail, being in close proximity would be a good plan to have in the future instead of the way it's so distributed right now throughout the county. I do say on the second bullet, Supervisor, that Sierra Vista is factual information. They are the majority of the reported crime, reported arrests, court filings, court proceedings, probation caseloads, jail admissions, and daily population. Close second behind that would be the sheriff's office making arrests, but they are the majority of that. So that's just a simple matter of criminal activity.
Again, this has been the county seat for
Yeah.
decades. And so when you start dismantling Bisbee and the court system and the jail because it's been here and then move it, I don't know if you've talked about the economic consequence of the people who work in the jail that come from Douglas and Bisbee,
Yeah.
all the people who work here. I mean, that's going to be a huge, huge blow
Yeah.
and then you're going to have just another area of poverty. So
Yeah.
do you address any of that in the study?
Well, when we get to the site selection, we're going to talk
Okay.
about how we rank that. Of course, that's subjective, and you all will be able to do your scoring.
Cost benefit analysis.
You what?
Yeah, but there's more than
Bottom
just,
line
there's
is there.
more than just transportation. It's
Yeah.
jobs, it's communities, it's,
Yeah, it can be factored in. You can do a CBA and include that in there.
well, I'm just, it's a huge.
Oh, Mr. Crosby has a profound comment.
The cheapest in terms of population is going to be the highest population. And I don't hear my constituents, which is Sierra Vista, screaming for the jail to be in Sierra Vista.
They voted for it.
Therefore, nobody's saying we want the jail to be in Sierra Vista that I'm aware of. Maybe they do, but nobody, not so much that
I don't want the jail to be in service either.
Okay, so the totality of the circumstances is that I want my friend Ms. Gomez to be a big hero in her district.
I don't want to be a hero. What I want to do is sustain what little, economic activity goes in Bisbee and in Douglas. I just don't want these people to lose their jobs. That's all there is to it. I'm going to fall on the road.
No, that's.
That's just what he thinks I'm whining.
Oh, is it
It's just,
I bring it all the way.
I got you. I'm looking at purely the data and the best place at the
But
most
that
cost
is not
effective.
everything.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
It's gonna cost
If it isn't,
something.
if it isn't driven by data, it's driven by emotion, and
No, it's
emotion is the road
about
to hell.
being able to-
Emotion is the road to
So
hell.
you want everyone in Sierra Vista, right? You want to just
No,
populate
I'm looking
and
at-
put everything in one
The
basket.
support costs, the facilities costs, all the aspects of maintaining and supporting that jail, where will be the most cost
So
effective?
you're just going to move all the courts and everything, and that's going to be an added expense. It's going to be much more expensive to lease it.
Sometimes
And-
there's an upfront cost or capital expense that over time value of money turns out to be a better decision.
And in better counties where you have everything spread out, where there's a lot of, it's not all populated in one area, but you have an economy in Bisbee. This has been the county seat. This has been where it's at. We can improve with their.
Tombstone's been the county seat too.
Of what? I don't care about.
Cochise County.
Well,
Tombstone used to be the county
In
seat.
the interest of time, because
Yes.
this conversation about location, we're going to get to that.
Yeah, we're
You
gonna
at least got to be on the hot seat.
we're gonna bring out the pewgle sticks and football helmets.
Can I just add something real quick?
Sure.
this is a planning study.
Right.
And a lot of the discussion you're having, which is great,
Yeah, very good.
we'll be following the planning study
Sure.
when you make the decision
Yes.
on where you want it, because these are just rankings and
But as you say,
Yeah,
data is everything. So this is the data that he's going to use to make his decision.
I just wanted to let you know, it's ultimately going through the presentation and the conversation you're having is actually where you're going to eventually have to go someday on making that decision.
But back to Ms. Chu, go ahead,
Yeah,
go
go
ahead, let's let you get this knocked out. I want to get to the scoping side of the discussion for the sizing and how we're going to lay this thing out and how we're going to make it modular and, you know, how we're going to build for this, but then wait to build for that, you know what I mean? That kind
Well,
of.
I just want to just follow up one thing on the supervisor is that I was asked as part of this study, and it's not the main part, it's a matter of the programs in the appendix document. This is a jail study.
Mhm.
However, it was asked to say, in the meantime, could you also develop a program and square footage needed for a courthouse of the future and a sheriff's office of the future? We don't know if we're going to do that or not, but at least when we look at sites, we'd like to look at some time in the future if you did want to locate so that you don't landlock yourself for future jail expansion or for adding
Yeah,
a
potential for
courthouse,
expansion.
whether that happens or not. That's yeah.
And
And the other thing that's not in this, but it's in the report, there's a considerable amount of money that is spent transporting already in this county. I mean, that, you know, the jail is not next to where the courthouse is. So I actually sat in with Phil in the early resolution court, you know, where inmates are coming in the back door. So there's a cost associated with you know, which is why my bullet said, you know, there's a benefit of having these functions that are interrelated in the same location. But whether that's going to happen or not in the future, at least a site hopefully would be big enough that you could consider jail expansion even beyond 2050 and maybe beyond that if you needed a new courthouse or a sheriff's office, you could co-locate it
well,
there.
hopefully those people can make those decisions based in 2050. No.
Well, the last bullet point that's really important before I get into some alternatives is that what's driving this jail population, I mean, obviously there are people, serious criminals that are in their jail, but if it's like every jail in America, and the data proves that it is, it's drug and alcohol, it's homelessness, it's certainly mental illness that is a huge factor in the population of the jail. And that's going to play out in terms of what maybe alternatives you could look at, other jurisdictions are doing to be able to, you know, for the appropriate population to handle them in the community, which doesn't mean it's free, but again, it's less costly, typically more effective, and what really helps to reduce that recidivism, that cycle where inmates with those characteristics cycle back and forth in and out of the jail population. So some of the things that came out of the study that in terms of looking at, you've had some previous studies done to look at, for example, to expand electronic monitoring, to put in the jail, which I have in the jail program, an area. And you're lucky because you have a jail that's, you know, jail commander is willing and would like, you know, is in favor of doing something like this, where they could be screened. And if they didn't really pose the public safety risk, you know, they could be released or released on a monitor to assure their appearance in court. And that's going to be, again, anything that's going to reduce length of stay in the jail or get the appropriate people out is going to be less costly and fewer beds you build in the future. But there's also things like I gave the example of violation of probation, that it should, you know, if they violate probation, they're placed in jail and their probation hearing is 30 days out. But then they've lost protective factors. If they did have a job, if they did have a place they were renting to live, anything that's going to reduce that length of stay for the appropriate population.
We talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
That was the point I was saying too.
Also, we know technology will help too. There's some delays that happen now between the point of someone being released and getting literal paperwork to the jail. And some of that, you know, technology can help in a new jail where you've got the appropriate technology for if you're going to do an initial appearance. You have an attorney come in with a client in the jail. You're not going to find out, well, our technology is not working or we don't have a room ready because your jail just doesn't have the space to handle some of those things that would help. Again, anything that's going to reduce the delay factor. You know, the jail is supposed to be the pretrial holding until you find out if they're guilty or not. Anything that's going to reduce that amount of time is going to reduce the number of beds you need in the future. Some of the other things that I think it's really important between now and whenever a jail does come out of the ground here is to develop with everybody around the table, the appropriate people, a criminal justice coordinating council, because the jail is just, they're the recipient to what everybody else is doing. So, you know, what's happening with probation, what's happening with the Superior Court, if there's a roundtable meeting quarterly to say, here's some things in the report that have been identified that we could be thinking about, and do we want to do that? And even if some of it's not free, we know, and you're going to see in a minute, that it's less costly than a cost per day in a jail.
By chance, did you look at our and I don't know the answer, are bail bonds population, how many bail bondsmen we have? Do you look at that?
Well, one thing I did look at seriously about the bond practice is that you do have a physical bond schedule, but it's not followed because you have 6 justices of the peace setting, one justice will set a bond at a certain amount for the same offense as someone else. So the more uniformity you have, and in this jail program, I did put an initial appearance or an arraignment courtroom to make that initial decision. Are they going to be released? Is the bond going to be set? Because when you have, it's not equal justice when you have.
But I mean, do we have bail bondsmen though that grant, is there a sufficient number of those guys?
But you also have people in jail that can't make bond. I mean, it's obviously,
The mayor of Wilcox, his name is escaping me.
He's a bail bondsman?
He's the former mayor, yeah.
Oh,
Laws.
Laws. There you
oh, Laws was a bail bondsman?
So there's a lot of people that can't make bond, right? That's what you were saying.
That's what I'm saying. Bail bondsmen help with that, right? They'll take your house as a collateral for the bond, and then they'll go to the court, they'll pay your bond, and you'll get out. That's what I'm saying. If you don't have a bail bondsman,
People who are in jail don't have houses.
well, I'm just saying.
well, as I'm sure you've read in the national news for many years, the pendulum's swinging a little bit different this last couple of years, but there's many people in jail. $1,000 bond is that you got to put up 10%, it's $100. I'm sure everybody around this table has $100, but there are people in jail that have no money. And so the question is, do you want them to be in there because the fact they don't have money, if it's only $1,000 bond, it's probably a low level offense. These are things that, you could have this big of a jail or you could have this big of a jail in the future. And not knowing in the absence of what, because I'm going to show you in a minute, I mean, you could have 600 inmates on a given day. If I took that 315 or 335 inmates a day out into the future and said, that's going to be your new normal, you're going to be at 600 inmates. But there's many things that I try to explain, and one in particular in Cleveland County, or Cuyahoga County, the whole reason of bond is to make sure it puts the skin in the game so someone's going to appear in court. Well, and then if they don't appear in court, a bench warrant is issued. If you get a bench warrant, if you're just driving down the street and the sheriff or someone stops you, you're going to go to jail because you didn't appear in court. So across the country, there's the question is this good economic sense that we have low-level offenders who have no money, who are taken up, over 100 days in the jail, that there's other things we can do, such as what they did and brought the population down just for the city of Cleveland's part of that jail by over 120 inmates a day, because they looked to see if this person's a risk, let's assess that, and we need to put them on a monitor. And they did hire some staff to do this. But compared to having all those people sitting in jail, and the failure to appear rate went from like 54% down to 4% because they had somebody making sure that they were going to appear in court. So they didn't have to, have bail bondsmen or post some amount that they didn't have. So again, many alternatives, other things that our jurisdictions are doing, they're not free, but they're less costly.
Gotcha.
And that's one example that I put in here with real data about, reducing a population by making sure that people would appear in court. Because if you don't appear in court, and even if you're charged with first-time shoplifting and a bench warrant's been issued, you're going to go to jail when you get picked up because you're on a bench warrant. So these are the kinds of things that I tried to expand on, but it will be not just for the jail to decide all that. These are other, judges and elected officials and other county attorney.
Bring the county attorney in here.
Public defender. Yeah, you got
Judge Thorne and his crew. And
Well-
have this discussion.
anyway, in the interest of time, but I certainly, much of this is expanded on the report. So now that you see that there was, varying kinds of population over time, there's several forecast models in the report, but I boiled that down to saying there's models that are kind of a low growth scenario, a moderate, and a high growth. So the first line on here you see is if I just took those couple of years of information about 350 or 335 inmates a day in the jail, you could be up at 664 inmates
Right.
On that high growth scenario, which is not what I'm recommending because you have such a consistent amount of 250 to 300 inmates a day for a 10-year period of time. So more the moderate level of growth and looking at population growth and the average daily population of the jail would say you could be up at 430 inmates a day. And that's by the year carrying out to 2055. And then finally, a low growth scenario where I did assume that some things would happen in the county to help this issue of length of stay, because everybody needs to be in the jail for that long, awaiting their appearance in court. And other things that are mentioned in the report as alternatives, if those could happen, maybe you could reduce that population by 10%, because all of the data to develop these forecasts is what your average daily population in jail has been. So I can't make any assumptions about what, if you would have done something else 2 years ago and developed a program like in Cleveland, but I am saying that I see enough evidence that if these things from now until it'll be a long time before a jail is opening. I guess that's a fair statement, right? You have time to be monitoring if these things do have an impact on reducing jail population and hence be able to build fewer beds. So the recommendation, and a little quote here from the Prison Policy Institute that does both prison and jail work, is that you don't want to overbuild, but you also don't want to start with a jail that's at
Underbuilt.
capacity exactly what they want. The recommendation that I'm saying is that based on looking at this data, looking at a 400-bed jail with a support core to accommodate 600, because the support core, I mean like the kitchen, it's not a kitchen that serves 400 meals is not that different, but you don't want to be in a situation where you couldn't expand even beyond a 400-bed jail. And in fact, the program that was developed, and we're going to see that in a minute, based on national standards, based on the classification of inmates that are currently in the jail, based on the need to have separate housing units because of, you got some, I call them bad actors, but there's some people that need to be in administrative segregation, a harder lockdown. Then there's some people that could be, compliant in a 48-bed housing unit. Most of the jail is, I'm saying, 2 people per room, not that many single cells, but there will be some that need single cells. But the jail program that I developed was a 468-bed jail. And so now if I go to the next page, here's a summary of that. And so this reflects in the details in the report, a building gross square foot of 204,760 for a 468-bed jail. Now, when I go back to, and it's Gary and Jacob will show in the diagram, I'm saying that go ahead and keep planning for that, but in the next few years, see if you could get that down with 2 fewer housing units in the beginning, closer to that 400 number, because I think there are things that this county can do to make sure you don't open a new jail at day one at 468 beds. Also, but this program is for the full amount. So when I develop a program, I don't know where it's going. So there's things in this program that can be backed out. And if you look at the detailed pages like maintenance area, maybe you don't need a big maintenance area. Maybe if you locate it in Bisbee, you can continue to use the maintenance area you have. Or maybe you don't need to put a staff training room because you already have one here in Bisbee. But if it's far away and the jail really needs to have a space, because jail staff needs to have ongoing training. So there are ways that this can be reduced, but the biggest reduction would be building fewer beds to start. And you have enough time to see what how the numbers in the jail will go up until you're ready to open it, until it's going through design. Also in this program, which brings it up from what not normal jail, but a new jail, there is a full-blown superior courtroom, the jury bench, everything just like a superior courtroom based on National Center for State Court standards. That could be the ERC courtroom, or it could also serve as if you have a high profile or like a murder case or something where you want to keep whoever's in the jail going to court right attached. And also to do ERC or other hearings, but that will have to be decided through the Superior Court. Will they have a judge? Like right now there is one judge assigned to ERC, Early Resolution Court, of which is 75% of cases are handled through the Early Resolution Court. So it makes sense to have it right in the jail.
Is that the GP?
No, it's a superior
It's
court.
Superior Court for that,
Right.
early resolution, but it
It's
is,
one courtroom.
right. And then, but they also have in there an arraignment court, much smaller, just for the initial appearance.
That's
And right now that is being done by the justice.
Yeah.
But there is good evidence to show that if that was an assignment and it was agreed to, this is the bond schedule, instead of every jurisdiction doing their own thing, you have more uniformity. I feel certain that would also be a way to reduce some of the people that are in jail. So that will take some operational agreement. I don't know if the Superior Court wants to have one of their, I did talk to the retired judge who did ARC that retired in December. And Phil and I actually sat in Early Resolution Court where they're bringing inmates, they're chained to the jury box in your courthouse. It's going to save on transportation. It's going to save on safety and security if that can happen in the jail. So this program does include a full Superior Court room, and it includes an arraignment room. The staffing estimate, and again, the detailed programs in the report, I took the mid-range salary for the staffing plan that was developed based on housing, other, what's going to go on in a new jail, and took the mid-range salary, and then to that added non-personnel operating costs that the county pays, and talked to your human resource and budget people about, you have to pay for health insurance and vacation days and all that, and it added what that fringe, called a fringe benefit factor, that not just, I couldn't just look at salary, you got to pay more than that. And then I also looked at the non-personnel operating costs. The main cost of the jail is staff, obviously, but then you also have to buy food and toilet paper and new mattresses and all non-personnel operating costs. And that budget came up to the cost per day for it. This is again for a 468 bed jail is $127 per day.
So that includes the staffing in there and everything?
Everything.
So, I mean, so is it true when you're building a modern jail with all this new tech, you actually need more staff?
Well, compared to what you have in the jail now, yeah, I would say that you need more. I mean, right now, in my opinion, I think that I don't even know to say that, but it's understaffed for what I mean. So this staffing plan reflects, and you're going to see in a minute for the planning tenants. The jail commander, Kenny Bradshaw, he was very clear in the planning part of this to say, we can't rely on direct supervision. We need to have a plan if we can't get the staff we need, that we are still observing, and you're going to see my little sort of concept diagram about how you could have housing units around a bubble with indirect supervision looking into the housing units in case we don't get the staff we need. This staffing plan reflects that you always have someone in a housing control center indirectly observing all the inmates in the jail. But quite frankly, and it's known through research, direct supervision in some of the specialized units, the mental health unit that's in this program, a woman's smaller unit for kind of all custody females, it's mental health and other issues, the maximum security. Right now I have a juvenile housing unit here, juvenile being not juvenile offenders that you're taking to another county, but youthful offenders that are, because of their crime, they've been waived to the adult court and they can be held in the jail, but they need sight and sound separation. You would need to have some staff in that housing unit. So it's a combination of relying 100% on indirect supervision, but the staffing plan includes staff in these housing units for the ones that are appropriate, where there's actually going to be an officer in that housing unit.
So just before this meeting, we were shocked by the 1.2 million or the increase in cost for staff. So could you tell us, or because I'm new, understaffed, it has been understaffed for how many years? For a long period of time?
Well, I'm only been there for the last year, so
Okay, so by how many numbers was it understaffed?
Well, I'm just saying a typical 300-bed jail, I would say that it would have, I think you've got like 75 or 80 now. That number would have been closer to 100 or 120. Yeah, I mean, just a ratio,
Okay.
And by the way, if this number is larger, which it is, basically your jail was designed for, I think, 184, I can't remember all the numbers, but it's in the introduction, 184. This is 468 beds, so it's considerably larger. And it has some of the specialized units that you need, which will have a higher staffing level. For example, the medical mental health unit, and even the staff in the medical clinical area, which right now is just like a room this size. And we already know who's in jail and what some of the service needs are. So there's a lot more square footage. It's a lot bigger jail, and it will require additional staff. Now. And even when I went over the staffing plan with Commander Bradshaw, he wanted to make sure if he can't get the staff, he still needs to make sure that there's observation of every housing unit in your new jail. But then people look at which ones can be direct.
Standard for one staff per inmates, is it one per 12 or something like that?
No, overall it usually is like 1 to 3.
1 to 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, for a new generation, well-staffed jail that has some level of direct supervision, that's what you'll find. And the $127 per diem, I was checking around it, because it always changes every year. If you Google the organization I always look at for the National Association of Counties, what's kind of the average per diem cost for a jail? Their number is 125. Maricopa County right now charges 127, but they also split it out. The first day if it's a booking, they charge $600. There's a lot more stuff that goes on in booking. But this is very much national average, or not a national average for counties. Although I do throw in the number, the jail that's closing down and turned into receivership in New York, Rikers Island, their per diem cost is $1,400 per day. It's $500,000 a year to keep one inmate in the most inhumane jail in America. So $127 compared to $1,400 a day. This is very much in the standard, 127 per diem cost. And if that, again, if you reduce some of the beds, that's going to have, and reduce some of the square footage and some of the areas that wouldn't have to be supervised if you build 80 fewer beds to begin with, then that's going to bring the cost of that down. Okay, now to go through just the planning attendance, and this is in the report, but okay, inmate supervision has talked about that. There'll be all these housing units, which I'll summarize in a minute, but you will rely on indirect inmates combined with direct supervision in some of the higher security, or even between like two medium male housing units, that there's someone indirectly supervising, but one staff could go between two housing units to do. So there is some intermittent direct supervision, because again, direct supervision is, started in the early 80s, and it's been shown that if there's human interaction with inmates in the appropriate setting, it's better than just having everything being remotely supervised. They never see it, all cameras. And so housing control will be that will be how you're going to provide the indirect supervision. Court services, this is all what's in the jail program. There's a superior courtroom, and there's an initial appearance arraignment courtroom. And it will definitely need to be discussed if there's agreement. If no judge is ever going to come to that, if they make that decision, which I hope that doesn't happen because you're spending a lot of money transporting them and you don't have a very safe way in your current courthouse to enter in custody inmates, that there should be a superior courtroom because it's going to cut back on transportation. There's other examples, even in this state, where having a court directly adjacent to the jail makes a lot of sense. So those are the two court programs. Then in terms of inmate services and rehabilitation, in the program, as you see, there are some designated spaces for educational or other inmate rehab programs. Like if there's a couple multi-purpose rooms where they can have a AA or an NA meeting, or they can have a religious service, or especially for those that do stay a long time, for the appropriate inmates. Right now, there's no place for that kind of assembly. But here there will be a couple of areas where that could happen, which is a positive thing, especially for the ones that are staying in jail for a longer time. And there will be space in the program both for contact and non-contact visitation with family for the appropriate inmates that, staff will decide if they're appropriate to have those kind of visits. But there's spaces in the program for that. Also in the program is your main central control room, which monitors all the exterior and interior of the building. And the security, the main security will be that if you have enough housing units, you could have a classification-based housing unit. So you're not putting in a maximum security, going through the classification with a minimum security. You're going to have housing units for the appropriate kind of inmate that you're putting in those housing units. And you don't really have the capacity and the space to do that now. So that's a good thing to have more housing units that be appropriate for the different population. Then, of course, there'll be intake screening and health services, where, the main nerve center of the jail where they come in, the initial assessment. And in the program, there is a space now in the intake area where you just have a little bit of office space, some storage, where the appropriate staff could be screening right at intake to say, do we need to admit this person, or could this person be released either, they're on their own recognizance to appear in court, or could we need to put them on a monitor, which is much less costly to assure their appearance in court. And that you don't have in the jail, and there's no room for that, but that would be a good thing right there at the jail at intake to determine whether someone needs to be booked in to the jail. And so that space is in here, and it's not a lot of space. And then for medical and intake screening, there's also area where, with the intake area, someone could be doing initial assessment about health, medical needs and that sort of thing. But there's also a clinic area that will have full clinical space that you don't really have now for the medical staff that you do have in the jail, and also some temporary holding rooms. So if there's something, an infectious disease or something that's going on, you have some rooms in the medical clinic where you could actually have an inmate or two, stay in those rooms in that medical area. Then we also have what's ancillary service in the program. There's much more attorney-client visitation. You had a report and that's also a delay factor. Attorneys need to have access to their clients. They need to have those conversations. They need to be private. So non-contact visiting and also connection from the housing unit, but you really need to make sure that there's, that's why I have it in a couple of areas where attorneys can visit with their clients. Then there's food service, laundry, and maintenance, and it says in the program, depending on where you're located, maybe you don't need to have all that maintenance space in the jail, but if it was out on, 20 miles or 30 miles, you're going to spend the money on a new facility, you're going to want to have some maintenance areas that can handle things that might come up right there. The staff training and development, I think that's really important. The staff, has ongoing training. I also mentioned in the program, if the jail is located in Bisbee, you could, right with the current site, they have a training center there, so they can use that. But again, it's in the program now, so there are ways the program could be reduced if needed. So that's let's see. So slide 12 shows what the current, again, 468 total capacity, combination, mostly double cells, but single cells where needed. Everything from special management, housing, and those kind of units tend to be smaller, again, for disciplinary segregation. And maximum, medium, and minimum security for male, 2 housing units for female, one that's kind of medium minimum, and then a special housing unit that would have their maximum females and special management. Youthful offender housing, that's a 16-bed unit that requires sight and sound separation. And then we have a 48-bed medical mental health unit in the program and a 12-bed intake housing. So when people come in, if there's a need to have a longer period of time to assess, so there's some serious mental health stuff going on, or detoxification, there's an appropriate place for that population to be in a smaller single cell unit. And then I think I showed these concepts the last time to say, all these housing units are shown in the blue boxes, and then just kind of showing how a housing control center will be looking into all the units. These are the male, and then the next one, kind of a special unit of female, which has, and then juveniles, the youthful offenders, and then a medical mental health unit with intake, and that would hopefully be located, or should be located directly adjacent to the mental health and medical clinic, so you could have clinical staff going back and forth in that housing.
Have you looked at the cost between single story and multiple story?
Well, I'll let the architect talk about that.
Okay.
But there is an increased cost, and also there's staff
Increase
issues about
for-
having elevators, having moving inmates.
So there's
up
an
and down.
increased cost for multiple stories. It's better to have them single story, even though
Generally-
the square footage overall's.
Yeah, I think you want to avoid elevators and stairs. That gets very pricey very quickly.
Got to deliver all the food to the housing unit.
True, if you're all one level, you got more foundation, but it's a simpler foundation, slab and grade, and then you have a bigger roof. But operationally, it gets awkward too to have to bring inmates up and down elevators or stairs. What I
Especially
mean?
they
So
don't wanna go.
there's an operational drag
Okay.
on that. So, but we've done it both ways. We tend to go multi-levels if the site is constrained.
But if we have a lot of open space, it's generally better to
Better
do
to-
a single story.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
And then you go single story, you can bring in a lot more daylight from above, which is always good. You can get daylight coming from above. And if you start stacking multiple levels, then you kind of come in from the side with daylight, which is less effective.
Well, you put the court system be on the second level, which you wouldn't have as much going up and down, but it still causes a
Well, that's-
problem.
No, well, a little bit, because you're trying to move a bunch of inmates to the courts, and so you got to bring them up elevators or stairs, and that, it's not ideal. But it all could be done.
Major metropolitan jails
Yeah, yeah.
tend to be high rise, and you've got,
Nothing's off the table.
4,000 beds or something, they would go up. But certainly from an operational standpoint for sight lines, issues that happen in the elevators breaking down. In Cuyahoga County, it was a nightmare because it's a high-rise jail and the elevators were always broken. So trying to get inmates that probably didn't want to go where they were going up and down stairs, if you don't have to, operationally.
Crazy movies with elevator scenes.
Oh, Hannibal Lecter, right? I mean, with the elevator, Hannibal Lecter.
Okay, well, so I talked about the 204,000 square foot jail that's in here, which includes support rooms. But again, this is the beginning of a planning study. Now,
Right.
if you're going to build your house, you're going to say, here's the house that I need. And it's not just, a wish list. The program is based on national standards. There's things you have to have in a jail. There's so many square feet per bed, and you have to have recreation space. You have to have visitation space. There's a lot of, all those national standards have been complied with, as well as following the classification. You can't just say, all the housing units are the same. You've got some inmates that are very compliant and there's some inmates that are just not compliant at all. And and then you get mentally ill and all that combination. That's the program that has been developed for 468 beds. So what I'm saying is many of the things about alternatives and this is the square footage savings that I've identified be considered. So for example, if instead of you starting out with 468 beds, if you start with construction, but showing completely on dashed line, which these guys are going to talk about in a minute, where an additional, those 8 beds could be added, that's going to reduce the program by almost 19,000 building gross square feet. So that's taking that off there. I size the cells, and I like to size the cells. It's 10 square feet over what's considered standard for single cells. And then because frequently, if you do have to add a second inmate, if it gets overcrowded, even if you're going to do a jail expansion, just that additional 10 square feet. And for the cells that are double occupancy, if you have handicap or the radius of a wheelchair, it's more comfortable to have that additional 10 square feet to make sure that works. But if you said, nope, we're just going to, all of our single cells are 70 and all of our double cells are 90, it's not going to save you a lot of square footage. And I would say it's at 17,000 building gross square feet might not be worth saving because I think you're going to have more flexibility if needed to put a second person in a single cell. But it would save you. If you locate the facility in Bisbee, you could save because I have a full training center in here. That could be saved because you could use that if it's right next to where the jail currently is. And then certainly the issue of maintenance shops, that's a big chunk because I have all the kinds of maintenance shops that would, electrical stuff you need to, in a new expensive facility, you're going to want to have the right people trained to fix those kind of things. And but if you have a big maintenance shop already and maintenance area, which you do at the jail, you could save that square footage. And so that's 24,000 building square feet. And an excellent idea that I will say came from the sheriff's office yesterday. You might want to consider, instead of doing that 16-bed juvenile housing unit, juvenile meaning youthful offenders, so they need to be in the jail. They're not your kids that you send over to Pinell County. If you use that 40-bed facility, that could be, you could reduce another almost 6,000 square feet that's in the program right now and have that, and that's a very appropriate facility, by the way, even if they've committed a serious crime. Their age, that's the right kind of a facility for a youthful offender or a juvenile. So you could take another 5,600 square feet off of this. So, there are ways, and then that doesn't even account for if you're going to develop other alternative programs or expand what's available in the community. So when you turn it over here and talk about the cost, there are ways that I would suggest for consideration. However, to just say we're only going to go with a 380-bed jail means things are going to have to happen to assist so the jail just doesn't have everybody coming in. There has to be agreement among elected officials, the courts, the prosecutor, to say we're going to change some of the ways we're doing things, and we're going to try to really keep a lid on how long people are in jail to be able to make a lot of reductions happen. Or else, and again, remember the graph, if nothing happens, you could be at 600 inmates in the future. Yeah, I can talk about it. Probably questions, right? Shaking or leaving, he says. Okay.
Like 4 cans of product.
Was there a study on I have a lot of people say, was there ever a study done by you all to just see what it would cost just to keep the existing jail and make it, improve it?
Well, in my introductory chapter of this, I took it right out of other reports because you've had several reports done.
We have had several reports.
Several. And every single one, Supervisor, has said this jail is met its useful life.
Yeah.
It's, I will turn to them.
No, and I agree with you. It's just a lot of residents, a lot of constituents who say, well, we can just fix it. And I think, well, before you can say that, just tour it. I toured it. They haven't. And if you tour it, you immediately know that it's gone past its life.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
That's my opinion, and I've been doing this for 43 years.
And I know they're listening, so I asked the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there have been some.
Of course, but you didn't have just one. There's been over the years, which then in the introduction I say that's what led to your having an election for jail district tax. I think everybody's in agreement that jail has met its useful life. All the reports that I read, we did not, as part of our contract, do another assessment of the physical plant, but we were provided all the reports.
And that's just be like pouring money down a.
Hmm.
down a
Right,
drain, right?
look to the architects to find out.
We would think so, but, you know, we do have clients who just insist upon using their existing infrastructure, even if it means selective demolition, because that is also an option too. I don't know if that really would work with this jail, but you could start to demolish parts of it and add new pieces onto it that are more rehabilitative or focused on behavioral health and treatment.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, we have examples of that. You know, not everybody walks away from their existing jail. I think your jail is kind of a bit of an exception to the rule because it is certainly gone through its useful life. But it's not to say that it couldn't be done either. But I think you would have to involve a selective demolition. The existing jail that would remain would have to have quite a bit of money for renovation. That's very expensive. And
An ongoing operation. I mean,
Yeah.
all
You gotta do it while you still got.
yeah, all the inmates
Inmates.
about when we're renovating.
it's so expensive. Yeah, you know, it's
So,
just,
yeah.
so, all right, on the next.
Pio style. Put them all in a tent out back,
The tent and.
armed
Yeah.
guards on towers with machine guns. While you,
All right, well,
while you fix
You
it.
know how many
Now we
lawsuits
I
you
know,
get?
I know.
yeah. Now we're going to get to the good part of the presentation. So anyway, so we developed a very high-level initial concept plan for this jail based upon Karen's program and completely based upon the program of about 200,000 square feet, 468 beds. And it's a very simple diagram. It's to scale. It represents best practice evidence-based design. There's a lot of thought that went into it that does not seem apparent here, but right in the middle of the jail is the so-called support core, which is intake, transfer, release. That's kind of the main red portion there in the middle. Directly below it is medical. Medical and intake, they work hand in hand. Medical also works directly with housing units. So that's kind of the core of the project. And directly above intake is the arraignment court or the superior court, you know, those initial appearance courts. Again, next to intake. Across the hall on the right-hand side is the public lobby, administration, staff services. And then at the bottom is programs, jail programs. And then the gray area below that is services. You know, it's kitchen, laundry, maintenance, power plant, that type of thing.
So help me out, when a municipal police officer brings an inmate in, where is that occurring at? Where do they physically drive in? Through the secure yard?
See the secure yard on the left there?
Okay, so that's not where the inmates play basketball and.
Yeah, there it is. No, see,
We have.
so so it's zoned. Let me just go back up, you know, because it's zoned, you know. This is the secure yard. So this is official vehicles only. On the right-hand side is staff parking. Above that is public parking. And at the bottom is the service entry. The housing units are based upon the cluster diagram that we showed earlier, you know.
Right.
And so this, you see here, this is a single cluster. There's a control room here in the middle that looks at four to six housing units, depending on the program. But every housing unit has an outdoor recreation yard. And that's a small yard, it's fully secure. So, you know, the inmate can be
Where is that?
right here.
No wedge.
This wedge.
Oh, that little thing there is the outside.
Well, it's
part?
about 1,000 square feet. You know, this represents 200,000 square feet.
Man, that's secure vehicle yard. How many freaking vehicles are we planning to have at this jail if that's the scale? Holy cow.
Well, you can, you know, and again, it's a diagram. So,
It is
you
a-
know,
yeah, I got it.
you know, you have buses coming in, you know, you have turning
They're not
radius,
just all-
those type of things. So,
Well, I'm just looking at the outside yards for the inmates compared to that. It's like, wow.
well,
Those
you
are
know,
1,000 square foot in the it's not.
They're 1,000 square feet?
yeah. And they vary in size too. Some are smaller. But
Again, is it right up there?
Right there.
Yard,
Right.
right there?
yeah.
Yeah, both sides.
And so, you know, basically it's 4 clusters. So there are 2 clusters here, and then there are 1.5 clusters here, or 2, depending upon the reduced version. You know, Karen talked about 468 versus 388. So we can lop off half of this cluster and make it future to get to the 468. And then above and beyond that, you can still expand on either side to get to the 600. The core area is pretty much sized for 600, but there's still opportunity for expansion. And the reason for this diagram is also thinking about the big master plan, as we tested the sites to include, in the future, possibly a courthouse, which would occur right across the front. You'd build that courthouse right up against the jail. There's no driving inmates. You're just going through a secure hallway, and you're bringing them up by it. In the case of a courthouse, you would go up by elevator, and you'd put them in between the two courtrooms. That's a very standard courthouse design. And that, it doesn't get any more efficient than that. And there's a lot of precedent for that type of diagram. So it's a concept, but it's very efficient and straightforward, operationally effective. And, you can see the cells here. It's quite light, but it's all based upon borrowed light rear chase. And those cells can be either metal boxes, prefab boxes, or prefab concrete, or you can build it out of CMU. Eventually you kind of do the analysis, the cost analysis, what's cheapest at the time. And then all the utilities to those cells are in a corridor behind the cells, so maintenance doesn't have to go into the secure perimeter. So that we have a lot of examples of that. It's very efficient. And then the front of the cell has a window to the day room, and then the day room has skylights, so the light comes in, and it meets all the standards for American Correctional Association. And then, if you have a 48-bed unit, say here, then you use that as a direct supervision. You have an officer in there during the daytime, but at night they would revert back to the control room in which they can monitor, I don't know, this is about 150 beds in this area here, in that area, 128.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the reason we wanted to do this just to get a size, an overall size, and then start to factor in parking and circulation. And then from that, we developed the idea that it's about 42 acres. And then these are some initial concept views of what this building is. It's, it's basically a big building, it's one level. All the light would come up through the skylights, both in the program support area as well as the housing. These are the outdoor rec yards. They would have a mesh lid, a security mesh lid. And then they would also have a bit of a secure mesh across the front. So daylight would be able to come through here. There will be windows between the rec yard and the day room, and so that light comes through. It's a standard design. We can show you photographs of that built. And then in addition to that, there could be more skylights throughout.
So just having a yard with high fences is no longer.
No, not for a jail. No, really not. And you don't want to bring everybody, you don't want to be moving inmates across the jail to put them in a rec yard.
Also, that you need to keep separation, and right
Yeah.
now it's required to have so much area per day of outdoor recreation. And so that, if you just have one rec yard, there's no way you're going to have 468 inmates to keep your maximum security, get away from protective custody, away from youthful offenders. So the easiest way to do that is to have outdoor
Yeah.
rec right
So
at the
you
house.
just have the roof open, is what it is.
Oh,
No, it's
No one's getting
a
out.
secure,
But
yeah.
I mean, well,
Secure.
that's the only thing that you can see the sky.
Yes, you can
Yeah.
still get the light.
It's also high,
Yeah.
so it's hard to get
But
to.
the walls are solid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's,
Yeah, and there's several counties
you
in
know that
Baking.
it
Take
makes
a quick look at them. Pima County, the latest jails that they've added there are done just like this.
Yeah.
Mojave County is the same way. Coconino County is the same way.
It's not bad.
It's
not bad.
No.
common. But you have to take a look at it. You can see how it.
Yeah.
It is a one-level building, but those housing units, they have a tier. They have a mezzanine. So, there will be 12 cells downstairs and 12 cells upstairs. So you get a 20-foot ceiling height, and then you get skylights above that, and you get windows to this rec yard. So all in all, it's not a bad environment. And the idea is to keep the inmates in those units and not be walking them all over the place.
required more staffing also.
They'll double stack the cells and still have stairwell.
Well, mezzanine stair, but we don't have to do elevators.
Yeah,
to mezzanine.
Older and handicapped guys on the bottom floor.
Right.
Yeah,
Your guys
that's
on the
right.
upper.
Yeah,
But
it's
I
not-
see it as a handicap cell in every housing unit, whether you have
Yeah.
that many or not. So you could use it as a double cell unit, but you do need to have by standard. handicap.
and that
It
would,
caught my attention because you say single level.
Oh,
yeah, I know, I
Double
need,
level. But that's
well,
okay.
Just for housing.
by code, it's a one-story building.
Okay.
With a mezzanine. Only in the housing, right? And this is this concept, but but anyway, it's a very straightforward building, but it doesn't have to be unattractive either. And this would be kind of the public entry point. Concrete, precast concrete, we could add color and texture and form liners and such. It's an economical building material, could be tilt up. The entry lobby is here. There is part of the lobby is a community room. There is a multi-purpose room up at the entry, which is part of the program right now. And that could be used for after hours for the public, could be used by the staff for training, multi-purpose. It's a good thing. These are public buildings and they're not meant, the idea is to take away the stigma from a jail because you're solving problems with jails. And it doesn't necessarily have to have a high issue of stigma attached to it. And there are also places where staff work. Your biggest investment is staff, and you need to create better environments for the staff. It's been proven to reduce staff turnover, absenteeism, improve morale. You just really have to think about staff first. If you're not interested in creating a better environment for the inmates, it's the staff. And that's a direct payback because that's your biggest cost. Not the building so much, it's the staff. So, to provide a better working environment is a big part of the modern jail. So, and then materials, it's all regional desert kind of modernism, kind of minimalist modernism of concrete, metal, bringing in some landscape elements, but restrained.
That's the cheapest, I would assume, or is that more?
Oh, precast concrete, yes. Yeah. And then we can, those are some of those images are precast concrete. You embed a liner in the concrete to give it some texture and form and detail. And you'll do that up at the front where you see it, and in the back it just goes smooth. So we're proud of our jails. It doesn't have to be an unattractive building. So with that, I'll let Jacob run through the site options because, this basic footprint that we generate is what we use to test the different sites.
So, great. So we looked at 6 sites for comparison, and the goal here was to kind of keep that concept diagram that Darren had shared previously as a kind of apples to apples comparison of these 6 different sites, looking at issues of topography, utilities, extensions required for those utilities. And so we'll kind of break down each site and look through these different variables. So beginning with the Benson site, so this is at the intersection of I-10 and North Civil Road. Its strengths include its excellent regional access and visibility from the I-10. And it's got a gently sloping terrain, which supports that flexible development that we had talked about previously, the future kind of build-outs of the site. Some of the challenges, there's essentially no existing water, sewer utilities on site, so some significant infrastructure investment will be required either via well, septic, or a package treatment plant for Benson.
On that site, is this that you're looking, do we own any of that land, or that would have to be bought?
I don't believe you own that piece of property.
Okay, so we don't own it.
Moving on to Tombstone, so this is at the intersection of State Route 80 and Davis Road. It's just northwest of the Tombstone Airport. The strengths here, it's a large site with visual prominence from State Route 80 and Davis Road. You can see how it's kind of positioned, elevated up on the hill, kind of buffer noise from the highway, and also provide a kind of frontage to Davis Road. The challenge is there's essentially no nearby utilities for this site, with exception of the telecom. So all utilities, gas, water, sewer, power, will require roughly 3-mile extensions
So,
for this.
Phil, I went out last weekend and I walked that site that I talked to you. It's not as bad as you think it is.
But again, we don't own the
The
land.
one north.
The one north of Tombstone,
Yeah.
up on the hill, just up from the sewer plant. It's actually, and it's all state trust land, and it's pretty flat. It's deceptive on the satellite, but when I walked it, I drove my truck out there. I walked that whole plateau up there.
But let me ask you,
I'll just interject something.
Sure.
You brought that up. The sites they evaluated, they're just general sites
Yeah.
that we picked based on discussions, not only that came out of your process you went through with your jail tax and some others. I've always thought that just like anything, when you start to see these areas, you might need to adjust them. For instance, what you brought up, Chairman, was possibly moving Tombstone to the north to try to hook up to utilities, and that's an appropriate thing. If
Yeah,
you
and
divide,
I
if
think
you
you
decide
there, the
you
sewer
decide
plant.
Tombstone's an area,
Yeah,
and you say this is the site the board wants to do, then you start refining where that location is, and that will probably help you in some of the aspects of bringing down costs.
not
But
for
for
their
their
poor
study-
guy's thunder, but I'm just saying
wait,
that
wait.
there's not much utility in these sites at all.
But we don't even know if Tombstone has the ability
that
to
was my
provide
point.
the services with their existing services.
They
That would
don't.
have to be something you'd have to look at.
They have an old system. In fact, they're having to try to get money for the water system,
Yeah.
for the sewer system. And so going into that is just going, you're hooking up into an old system that's not going to be able to take that.
Think of the sewer bill that they would get from this jail.
But they would have to replace everything because you can't
Yeah,
connect.
yeah, and the effluent that we could recharge.
You can't connect your old system into a more high technology, demanding system. It's just going to explode all theirs. And, go talk to the city council and the mayor, and they're very concerned about that aspect of it. And so, you have to also, include what the community feels about it, not just what we may think would be
All
good.
very good points you all are bringing up. And again, the comment I made yesterday when talking to the TAC was, in a lot of cases, the site selection is not part of the jail planning study. We
No, I
were
got it.
asked to put that in to provide information to the board. Many times it is already determined by the board for various reasons. And so that's something, they're doing an analysis for you, but ultimately I think following this, there's going to have to be a discussion with the board and a citing by the board, and that's in one of my.
Put in the water
My
pump,
tinfoil
an
hat,
old car.
my tinfoil
I can
hat
tell you
theory
this
is
works.
you were driven down a road to influence a decision which is preordained in this right here. I'm just telling you. I'm just saying, it's not your fault because you were
Was a previous
You were given
board.
these potential locations for a purpose. That's my 2 cents.
But after they're done.
I got you. But that's why I said I want to steal this poor guy's thunder because you probably put a lot of work into
He
this.
did.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
but let's let him go through it. But,
Yeah.
but honestly, ultimately, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
the board is going to know what political.
This was unfortunately before the election, and it drove a certain perspective that is different now, I would argue, dramatically from what you, unfortunately.
And I think the comparison is going to bring forth certain criteria, which we're going to talk about next in our site.
That's the important part, but
Issues of topography, utility, these things need to be thought
And-
about.
But on
in
this
plan.
one that you have Tombstone,
Yeah.
that is state land, right?
Uh,
That you're
No.
looking at?
not where they're at Davis Road. The one that I'm looking at.
Well, I'm not, I know you, but I'm talking about Davis Road. Is that state land? All right.
Well, actually, it's private land. I'm
It's
sorry.
private.
This is private land in this
Yeah.
location.
This is private land,
Please don't-
not state.
Don't
Okay.
go.
Yeah, we'll worry about that later because we don't want to tip off the owners so that they start raising the price and stuff. Although they're looking at it right now, they're already calling their real estate agent.
Right? Cochise County does. And did they ask, just a question, when you were asked to look at these sites, they say, hey, maybe it's a good idea that it's the county-owned land so that we don't have to go into that.
I gave
extra
them the
cost.
sites based on conversations in 2024 with your staff,
Uh-huh.
your not only administration, but jail commander staff.
So that
And
means
then
that-
I went back and looked at actually if there was any comments made during your jail outreach. And I believe one site might have come out of the jail outreach, which was North Civil Road.
Yeah, that was
With the
initially,
discussion.
we're looking
So-
at it for,
I don't want to take up time on that, but I gave these sites based on discussion with your
Okay, so
county
my
staff.
just one question is, that was not a high priority. Look at land that the county owns, so we don't have to go into the cost of buying it. That's just what I was wondering.
It was not given to me as a priority.
Okay.
There are a couple that are owned by the county.
Okay, thank you. That's good.
We'll keep marching through here. I think so 4 more sites to kind of cover. Sierra Vista at the intersection here of Charleston Road and Mosen Road. This site is kind of set between the highway to the north and the floodplain, which you can see just to the south, not part of the 42-acre parcel, but something to be kind of cognizant of. Its strengths include its proximity to Sierra Vista, the population center there. And it's got a moderate terrain, so it does support the expansion east and west, as we had covered earlier. Some of the challenges here, infrastructure, water, sewer, gas, all 3 of those utilities will require 2.5 to 3.5-mile extensions. And some grading will be required given the kind of sloping conditions of the site.
And my question is, the land is not owned by us, right?
Sierra Vista is owned.
I believe-
By the county?
By the county.
Yeah, I saw when I looked on GIS that it showed ownership on the west side of that road. by-
West side of the
by
road?
Cochise County.
So all of it is county?
It's your district.
All of it's county?
That was, when I looked
Okay.
on your GIS, it showed.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
I just didn't,
Yes,
I thought that part of it wasn't, so thank you.
The Douglas site, so this is at the intersection of State Route 191 and North BDI Road. It's just south of the Douglas Airport. Again, the strength for this site, similar to others, large, expansive site, a gentle slope. Its proximity to the state prison off to the north offers some potential for infrastructure and resource sharing with the prison. Some of the challenges here, it's a relatively remote setting. In addition, connections to nearby utilities, including the well and sewer, will be required for the Douglas site.
But that's.
But there's already gas in the water and sewer.
Pretty big wells, too.
So yeah.
But a huge problem with transportation costs. Well, it's at the other end of the county.
yeah.
Yeah. Like Benson.
Yeah. Yeah, electricity, natural gas, and telecom are available on site. Well and sewer, lift stations available, pumps will be required for the sewer connection. So it's a bit of there are some existing utilities. There are some existing utilities on the site. So electrical, natural gas, and telecom are available on site.
Okay. And then what would be required for sewer?
An additional pump will be required for the sewer connection. Yeah, so that'll probably be utilizing the existing resources again at the state prison to the
And
north.
didn't you guys just do a bunch of stuff for the well?
In the airport.
The wells.
So what's the state jail doing for sewer? They got their own funding basin or they send it?
It's to the city,
Okay.
city. So they-
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you,
Yeah, we can follow up on that too if I don't have that answer for you right now. I'll have to look at it, but we can follow up. Yeah.
So
Well, neither
it's
is
the
the
time to
agenda.
even look at it.
Well, I agree, because it's at the opposite end of the county.
So
You're
we
so
still do.
intense about transportation costs.
Yeah.
I would definitely say
Yeah.
no, and it let me forget that one.
Don't.
Don't worry about it.
No. Yeah, and we can follow up to any question we can't answer here. So yeah, the state prison, we can look into that. For the Bisbee Melody site, Again, this is just west of us here today at the intersection of 92 and Melody Lane.
Beautiful window right there.
Yes, we can look
See
out our
where we
window
go.
and see that one here off to the west. Some of the strengths here, again, adjacency to the county facilities here. So the infrastructure utilities are readily available for the site. Those include water, sewer, electric, and telecom. Some of the challenges for this site, there will be an extension required for the natural gas pipe along Melody Lane. And there's some moderate, topographic variation with the site, as we are well aware.
But, and I thought we owned that land, but we don't. We do not own that land. Okay.
And last but not least here, so the Bisbee existing site, this is at 203 North Brook Drive. Again, strengths for this site, its central location to Bisbee, kind of strong civic presence. The existing utilities, as we all are aware, are in place. Challenges, though, and those are, very, very true for this site, are the topographic variation. There's very limited space available for the build out of the future jail, and that will limit, expansion for those future phases of the jail.
But my question is, for the Bisbee side, I understood that the land that is flat might be given by Freeport because they own the land, that they would be willing to give it or to lease it or whatever, but that there is that ability to expand because that's a flat area.
They own the adjacent land is the answer.
And I understand that would be a possibility.
I don't know of any, I can't speak to the ability to get that land for any reduced value, but it is owned by the mine. And in my past work, mines tend to work good with adjacent government.
And I
agents.
just met with them yesterday, and they're very willing to
Freeport
talk about that.
Freeport owns the south part of that. It's Phillips Dodge owns the rest of it.
Well, that's Freeport too.
Is that Freeport too?
Yeah. Phelps Dodge is what they used to be called, and then they
Okay.
changed to Freeport. So like they said, they're not going to do mining in this area again, but they own a lot of land. So when we met yesterday, we talked about them wanting to do good things for the community, and that would be something that could be talked about, getting the land for them.
Sure.
At
Is that
very
the land down here?
It's the flat land down here. So this is all owned by Freeport and Phelps Dodge, which I guess they just never changed the title in West. And it's all that flat area. Just growing up in Douglas and Fourth Generation and such. Their land.
I'm going to turn it over to Larry next to kind of go into further depth in some of the site criteria.
So, as Phil had said, usually quite often the site selection is left to the board and we're given a site and said, this is what you can work with. But in this case, the consultants ourselves, we've been asked to make a recommendation. So what we did is we, as a group, we worked together and came up with this criteria. There may be other criteria you want to add to it. So it may not be as important to you, but it's a guide to help you go through and make the selection ultimately. And so the line items we looked at, of course, is, utility development, as Jacob had mentioned. We can go into that in some detail. Topography, that means grading, moving dirt around, et cetera, washes, there's complications of that on the sites. Purchase impact, which is what you mentioned about what land is owned and what is not, because that comes at a cost.
Comes at a huge cost.
Existing buildings, this is where we talked about the existing Bisbee jail, the possibility of, if it is there, to reuse some of the training facility that's there, the maintenance facility, and that has a cost impact also, the savings, not having to build that square footage. Population center, we touched on that earlier, is proximity to the major population centers. We think that's a very important issue, as well as the workforce. Where's the workforce coming from, for the facility, and primarily, of course, for the jail, for the original siting here.
Sorry, where did you find the workforce coming mostly from?
Well, we've had a lot of different discussions about that. I mean, currently they're talking about it coming from Douglas area, some of the workforce.
Good portion of it.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot of debate. That's
Bisbee and
subjective.
Douglas is
Looking,
really
yeah.
almost every
And then
Recruiting base those here. This
Yeah,
and other
but,
communities.
yeah, but that's true. But then we've already got an existing people, and then we got to bring them in and hire, there's a lot to be talked about. It's not so.
Hey, you're talking to a guy that had
black
to
and
move
white.
18 times.
Yeah.
Right? So
And, you know,
I have
I've
no
moved too.
sympathy.
I've moved too.
Yeah,
but,
all right. So, I
quite
mean, it's
frankly,
just, it's
but
not
you're not talking about, where you come from, Philadelphia and all that stuff. We're talking about a depressed area of Douglas and Bisbee, which has not had any kind of leadership to lead them out.
when we get your bus route, we just bus them.
But-
Let the county buses.
Yeah, and then that's going to
Perfect.
cost. So anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's many factors, and like I said, we can, go through those. Site access, just basically access to it from vehicles, to get in there. Services and vendor, which was an item that was brought up that, for instance, food services delivered anymore, it's part of a load off of a semi-truck trailer.
Right.
That they run all around. So, what we factored in here is being able to get a semi-truck trailer down to the facility, does it have to go through town? Does it have to go through cities? How quickly can it get there? Is it easy maneuverability, offload, get back up to the freeway and off to their next delivery? So that's kind of what that factor is looked at. And judicial functions, as far as someday, dealing with the courts, probation, et cetera, as far as just overall access to the entire sort of judicial system, if you would.
So right now, you're talking about jail, and then you're talking about expanding courts, right? So we're going to have to decide on all that with what little money we have, what we're going to
I mean,
do.
that's what we got to talk to Thorne and see if he'd be willing to put one judge permanently in the jail to do all the criminal cases. He's kind of doing that now, right? He's got the guy that just did the big murder case. What's that judge name?
Lindstrom.
Yeah, Lindstrom.
Well,
Right.
3 of the judges right now, they have criminal docket.
Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah,
the guy, I'm talking about
It's a dedicated.
one guy that does the jail population criminal side. The other guys are doing the other
Yeah, it's a
out
murder
on their
trial.
own recognizance criminal side, right? So they could do those here, right? And
These
then-
courts are the detention-related courts, the ones that would give you biggest impact on reducing transportation to and from.
That stops another
Yeah.
judge from.
But
Yeah.
so when you're looking at your score,
Mhm.
your 40 was for, of course, what you felt was the Sierra Vista, and then both business sides are only 3 points less.
Yeah,
So-
exactly, very close.
It's very, very, very close. And then when you factor other things into it, other than what you didn't include in your study, that could change the balance.
It's
of things.
subjective, and,
Right.
different people would score this differently, perhaps,
Right.
depending
No, I
on,
scored this.
yeah, absolutely. And that's something that, you just go through and what's the consensus and a lot of other factors outside of our control as to what makes sense there. One thing I would mention on the site utility factors there, besides cost of utilities and so forth, and the most costly, sites were, Benson was very costly on the utility side, Tombstone was very costly. And then but basically the other issue I wanted to bring up was you don't want to get into the sewer business. You don't want to get into the water business. Okay.
Yeah.
So those areas that needed a package plant, Benson would need a sewage package plant. Tombstone would need a sewage package plant at this particular site. And so that we took that into consideration too, to stay out of that. Now, water-wise, we're pretty good everywhere, even on the existing Bisbee site, but we do need to supplement the water supply with a storage tank for fire because of the flow and the demand, basically a little low. It's still acceptable, but we just had to put a tank in. Water storage tanks, not too big a deal. They're not too hard to maintain, but that is a factor, that particular site. Let's see. Moving. So anyway, this is how we kind of scored it as a team. We talked to it and came up with those, and there's a lot of different variables.
And supervisors, I just want to let you know, yesterday at the Technical Advisory Committee, the TAC group had a very lively debate about this as well. There's lots of opinions out there among the staff as to where it should go. And so I do encourage, as we go down that road, to get the feedback from staff as well on site selection.
And I'd also just like, the workforce too, have somewhat of an, I believe I know, but I'd like the supervisors to understand what the cost of moving it out of Bisbee would be to those who work there.
Mm-hmm. Good factors. Schedule, and just real briefly, we put together this rough schedule and line items just to kind of look through and get an idea of what, sort of the parts and pieces are going through as development of a project like this. And, basically, if things go well and kind of move along pretty well, it could be, 3.5 to 4 years from the time of basically site selection and say, okay, we're ready to do something here, and to basically moving in.
That's how long, I don't know why I assumed, and probably because I didn't realize all this was going on when you're talking about the justice system, is that so we're looking at 4 years probably.
Oh, yeah, minimum. I mean, and that's without any hiccups and any issues. And that's with, within a reasonable time frame here, a month or two, coming to a decision on the site.
Yeah, the site.
And a lot of times we've seen the site decision, when that pushes off, everything's going to push off, obviously. So, and it kind of breaks down, just to give you a sort of point of reference. It's we got a couple of 3 months for site selection and contracting, bringing on construction managers, architects, engineers, et cetera. It takes a few months to do all that stuff. And then design, on a good reasonable schedule is probably about 10 months from start to finish to be able to get construction documents ready to go build.
And when the site, once say the site is selected, then when we get into what we're going to build, we have to be able to know what the judicial system is going to do as far as all the different, suggestions you made.
Right. That's
And so
But you don't want to pigeonhole future costs with people and their
No, but-
opinions now, right? You gotta look at 25 to 30 years and factor that in. And if we have to adjust the workforce and adjust
No,
the
I'm
court
saying
system.
the court system, you think you don't consider whether they're going to implement all the different.
No,
policy
we do.
recommendations? Well, that's what I'm talking
Oh,
about.
okay. I thought you were talking about where
No.
everybody's going to be
No, no,
moving
I'm
and living
talking
from and
about-
driving from. You don't want to pigeonhole your
I think
decision
that you
based on where people are
We'll
driving.
argue that later.
Yeah.
Right now,
Yeah.
what I'm saying is that they have to embrace this too, right? When we decide on what kind of building we want to design, they have to be.
Yeah,
Well, there are two things. They have to know if they are going to, you're not going to build a courtroom that's cost per square foot is going to be very high.
Right.
The jail is too. If they're not going to ever put someone there,
Right.
number one. And number two, you definitely need to know if the whole section on here's what we could do, because you're not going to make a lot of that happen unless you have the superior
I mean, if
court
we-
at the table saying, we're going to try this.
So they have to be, I think the next step is they have to.
And we got to talk to both,
Exactly.
And we have
both the county attorney and
The defender, the court.
the chief judge
Right,
about.
what they're going to embrace and what they.
Right.
As Aaron mentioned, that core group to bring all those parts and pieces together and say, okay, this is what we're going to do to help keep costs down and what direction you're going to go in the judicial system.
Yeah. As you find midway in the 4-year period of time that nothing's happening, there's no change, then those dashed in future beds
Move to the right.
basically, you have to consider.
I just wanted to toss out, it's a very good discussion, but you don't have to delay starting a design process for that to happen, because you would include them in the design process and make those decisions as you go through and making sure they're going to implement.
I like the layout.
So I just want to let you know, it doesn't mean you have to sit down with them and say, oh, all this has to happen. And then you can start selecting a site, bringing on your professionals. You can start that process.
Well, yeah.
and bring them on board.
But at one point, they have to embrace all the different, because I was looking through all these recommendations you made, and they're
Not going to have.
they're a lot.
Yeah.
And it changes the whole culture and the whole way that we've been doing things for a many decades.
Yes, it does.
And change is hard.
Right. Change is hard.
Even long.
The absence of that is, you don't understand like the cost of delay and the cost of not making change. Again, not that anything you could, not all of it, which thought, but but every aspect of the justice system needs to be fitting down together to say we can keep going and doing everything the way we have been doing, for this is a chance for change, and we know that it's going to result in
More efficiency.
lower cost construction and a very humane jail facilities.
Meanwhile, these 4 years of these guys just, with the jail staying the way it is, right?
Yeah. Exactly. That's every, not to mention, cost. As things push out, costs keep going up. And then lastly on the schedule, there's about 2 years total with the construction. And then at the tail end, after it's all built and everything's done, it's substantially complete, the sheriff's department needs anywhere from 2 to 3 months to do what we call a shakedown period. So they've got to get familiar with
Practice running it.
operations, how are you going to
Yeah.
run it? How are they going to staff and run this new facility before you ever bring one inmate in? They've got to have it secure and figured out.
Yeah. I like this layout.
It's a good layout. Okay, then that brings us up to cost. Again, this is a rough order of magnitude, just like we talked earlier. This is the planning process. This is, Karen had mentioned about all the parts and pieces that make up, the entire process to be considered, as to what you may want and may not want and what you can trim back and et cetera. And so, essentially this is, all hard cost, all soft cost, everything that as planners that we would normally see in a facility of this size. And again, as it says, a rough order of magnitude. We're not contractors. We're not bidding on the project. We're just giving you a guide to help work through the process, while you make these other decisions about the actual program and operations of the facility. So just a couple little highlights I would have mentioned that, as Karen had mentioned, the bed capacity being the single largest factor there. That could equate anywhere to, $20, $30 million, one way or the other, depending on. So just to put a scale to that, every bed counts. And if you can make a significant impact in that, you've really cut the cost down a lot. The site selection, just to give you an idea, I'm looking at the site, just the off sites alone, the sites varied from about 12 million all the way down to less than $1 million. So what the point there is there's 28 to 59% variables in just the site that you select cost-wise. Now, that's just one of many factors like we've already talked about. And you got to weigh those. You got to weigh those. And maybe spending a little more money on a particular site factor may be beneficial for other reasons. But that all has to be considered. So that could equate to, $5-6 million worth of savings, depending on looking at, the more economical sites. And then, and with this, we provide, it's prudent at this early stage. It's not even a cost estimate. It's a rough order of magnitude. A lot of contingencies. It's contingency.
What kind of wrong factor do you put it here? What percent?
Contingencies. We have a 10% contingency on the cost, putting the numbers together, so to speak. And then there's another 15% contingency that's really added on top of that, that's in the county's hands, in the county's court, because of unforeseen issues and you may decide, you want to change something, you want to add something, or vice versa. If you can get contingencies down and trim those down to a real minimum range or appropriate range and not go to the high end, that could save $15 million.
I don't think you can, I didn't, all people have been hearing is going to be $100 million. That's not going to be, I think we can't cut things to have it just $100 million. This is about $200 million, right?
Yes.
For the jail.
Right.
So.
All in hard and soft costs.
Right.
We might be able to cut things to 130, 140.
And it's kind of a starting point. And then, as Phil mentioned, in the planning phase, you put the professionals and put everybody to the task. Okay, here's what our budget is. Here's what our maximum budget is. Here's our desired budget. Here's where we would like to be in that range. And, we've made some agreements on basically bed capacity, these big factors. And then you have a team start working towards that, and then that's the team that starts looking at, is there different materials we can use? Are there different aspects we can look at this? And then it really gets down into the weeds of what we call value engineering, which is a big challenge, with jail facilities, because you really have to factor operations into that. You just can't say, we can use a metal building to put these inmates in. Okay, yeah, to keep the rain out, but it's not secure, and over the long term, it's going to cost you more money to maintain that building. So that sets, the type of durable materials you want. And then the systems are the core of the facility: the sewer, the water, the electricity, the security systems, electronics, et cetera. And that's where you don't want to compromise. But now, is there ways to reduce cost in that area? Absolutely. Is there tried and proven ways that we use generally to come up with these rough order magnitudes? That's based on, not the high end or the low end. What it's based on is the trends and common practice around the country and what's been proven to work and be cost effective. So from that cost effective baseline, can you trim some things? Absolutely. And sometimes we have clients that say, well, we're not willing to give on this. We want to move this up to scale a little bit. And we want to spend more on, a water system or something because of, a lot of cases we get hard water and they want to use, water softeners and different types of controls and valves because they wear out quicker, So a lot to consider, But it's not, it's all achievable. It's a matter of just moving through the process.
So, Chairman, I have a few comments I just want to
Yeah, sure.
following their presentation. So seeing a number like that reminded me of some of my past, where I got large numbers in projects, one of which was the jail project, but many others. I work part-time for you as a project manager. I'm a civil engineer, and I've worked on a lot of projects throughout the day. One of the we were discussing this over the last couple of days. I don't remember a project we haven't had to bring into a better budget stance. Okay. In other words, I look at that and I go, well, that county is not going to be able to do that. That we have to look at things like Karen Shin just showed you how to shave almost 25,000 square feet.
Or 30,000 if you include the juvenile.
Yeah, these are the things that you do to bring those costs within what your budget is. Your county administrator said, maybe we could do it for 130. Ultimately, one of the best things the board could do is to set what your expectation for cost is and say, this is what we're going to do. Okay? Just saying. Because then you live and you work with your professionals, not only your professionals within the county, but your professionals outside the county. Okay? And the reason I bring that up is one of the biggest things you'll have to decide soon is your project delivery method. And many of us that talk about, contracting just think of low bid. That's not what you do in this kind of project. State law in Arizona allows you to use certain project delivery methods like construction manager at risk or design build for just projects like this, because what it does is it brings your contractor and your design professionals together early on in the process. Unlike if you're just doing a roadway and you hire an engineer to design a roadway and then you put it out to low bid, that's not going to work for you in a facility like this. You need to think about what project delivery method you're going to make. And then when you do that, that's how you keep the costs contained, is you say, okay, professionals, we're going to build it for X. This is what I'd like. And during that whole process, they come back and say, well, we were able to get it to that price, but you know what? We weren't able to give you everything, but we kept the bids, at the low end, but maybe we had to. There's a lot of value engineering, as you heard Larry mention, that goes through during that design process that almost takes a year before you get to the point where you get that contractor to commit to that cost. So I just wanted to kind of share with you some of the things you have ahead of you if you want to move this project forward. You're concluding a planning study, which is the best thing you could have done because it gives you the number of beds. I can't tell you how often people overbuild. We overbuilt in our county, our juvenile facility. It's an 80-bed facility. It opened up to 20 juveniles. So we learned from that, and when we came in and actually did our jail, we did this planning study first. It gave us very good information for the square footage starting point, but more importantly, it gave us the number of beds, the configuration based on our actual jail population that we have in our county, and let us build that facility. And we just kept on working during design and narrowed that cost down to where we could get it to where the board's number matched the facility. So you have to decide, these are the kind of things you have to decide in the future is location. It's really up to the board, and I urge you to think about that as you're going through the next months and discussing it. What is the site? Can you reduce the cost of that site from a utility standpoint? a topographic standpoint, make sure you're at least not building something that you aren't aware of that's going to cost you some money during construction. From a grading standpoint, don't worry that you may have some grading. You're going to have it, but you just want to at least be aware of that. You want to talk about your project management structure. I have been working for you part-time, and as you are aware, I like working for you. It's fun. I have a great time. But you are going to need a serious design and construction footprint to assist you, okay? And one of the things we did is we did go through the procurement process for an owner's representative. That's something you all can discuss if you want to go through with it. But that is a representative we use in our county. It's a third party. It's not your architect that you hire. It's not your construction management firm. It was a firm we hired that was our third-party representative, and they worked with our project management team, and they helped us guide us through all of our process. The programming after the study was in place, the design process, they actually helped us hire architects. They helped us hire the construction manager at risk, and it was very valuable because we had a pretty large team. I was a part of a 4-person team as the county administrator. I used to be public works director, so I had that background. I had an attorney on that team. I had our facilities director on that team and the assistant facilities director. And we still were glad we had that third party because the volume of work that's going to come at you on a project like this is a very serious venture, and any mistakes in it cost you money. So these are things I'm just urging you to think about. And then the last thing I would say is, so that's the project management structure. And the last thing is determining what method to go. You know, I provided information to county administration on, you know, the pros and cons of construction manager at risk and design build. The board can make a decision and go with either one. I would never recommend you build this structure in a low bid environment because you would suffer from it. That's just my opinion. You can ask architects about that, but putting those people together early on in the process during the design process and the programming and design process, and having your construction person, the construction manager that's going to eventually have to give you a price and be part of your design process is very helpful. It will help you make sure you don't go over budget during your design and construction project. So again, that's my spiel. I just wanted to get it out, and I thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen, too. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
This is
Very interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot to it.
It's going to be interesting next 4 to 6 months. Maybe actually I should extend that out so it's okay. July, August, September, October, November. Yeah, 6 months. 6 months. Next 6 months are going to be quite interesting.
And I didn't even bring up the funding issue.
Oh yeah.
That's
I've been looking. Sharon and I have looked at a couple. We looked at what's his name again?
People.
Yeah. I was actually really surprised.
We
At that
$65 million
at that
using
4.5% interest rate. Man, that's
Mm.
I can go build a new house and borrow money from it.
They were very
4.5%
helpful in helping
4.5%.
us with the financing
7%
of our facility. So you're hooked up with the right firm.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, the amortization schedule depending on our revenue and paying down principal. Like I said, you're looking at a 7 to 8 year. That was at 120 million, right? Which is 20 million from the state, and then borrowing 100.
I believe you were talking with Mark at Stiefel.
Yeah.
They have a very good team together at Stiefel. They assisted us with our financing. And like you said, they helped us in several ways that you may not realize yet. They helped us prepare for the rating agencies. They actually helped us make sure we were prepared to sit down with the rating agencies so that we could achieve the best rating possible during that process to achieve that rate. So they're thinking about that already, but when you actually have to sit down with those rating agencies, they will hopefully assist you prior to it to developing a presentation that you give them regarding the economic development potential in your county, which is important to those rating agencies. So you're heading in the right direction. You're talking to the right people. It's just the last thing I will say is this is not a race. This is a marathon. This is a multi-year project that you run into problems and you have to solve at every aspect of the project. You have to say, okay, we hit this problem. Now, how do we solve it? Let's work through it. So, thank you, Chairman.
I guess the bottom line too is that a jail has to be built. I mean, no matter how much people may want to say, well, let's just fix the existing one. That's from what I gathered from this meeting, not an option.
That's what I would say.
Yeah. Not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Pretty much said my piece as well. So, all right. Well, with that, just let everybody know the next meeting is going to be Thursday, May 29th, for a work session to cover the agenda for the next meetings to be held on June 2nd. So we'll be meeting at 10 a.m. So without that, let's call it a day. We're adjourned.